right, I think we are live. Just making sure everything is up. Yep, indeed, there we are. And welcome, everyone, to Implausible Nature. So here we are. It is Balanced Data Slate the day after. Dun dun dun. So, yeah. So, we got a lot to talk about, right, Bob?
Yeah.
There
Yep, yep,
is,
yep.
there is, uh, there is a ton of changes here. So the real question is, do we start with the data slate or the MFM?
Data slate probably because of tie it in.
Yeah. So there's quite a few changes here. As far as like the faction rules, really the only one that applies to Space Marines is one tiny yet important change, which, to be perfectly honest, um, doesn't really affect us. Does and it doesn't. Theoretically, it does, but that is, of course, they made Desolation squads a maximum 5 man. Now we'll get into this in a minute, but they really nerfed the hell out of these guys. Not that like we were super spamming them anyway. Um, so it, it's just one of those things where they definitely overcorrected on these. I think maxing them at 5 guys would have been enough with their current points, but instead they bumped them 30 points for the squad up to 200 points. These are basically useless models now. So hopefully you didn't buy 30 of these guys because now half of them are useless. Thanks, GW. Good job. But they weren't really our cup of tea anyway. It was a thing that you could do in Gladius for Black Templars, but I don't think it was something necessarily that was like to us, like playing to our strengths specifically. Um, so yeah. Beyond that, there's a bunch of core rules changes. One of them that's pretty significant, that does affect us, you know, in a pretty decent amount, is the devastating wounds change. So basically, in a nutshell, previously, devastating wounds on a 6 to wound did mortal wounds equal to the damage, and then that was it. Um, It's functionally the same for the most part, with one important caveat. It's no longer mortal wounds. It still ignores any type of save, invulnerable or otherwise, or armor save, whatever. So it still goes straight through. The big difference here is that mortal wounds roll over. So if I hit a squad of guardsmen with a thunderhammer and I get a devastating wound, its 2 damage is going to kill 2 guardsmen. Now it will only kill one because the damage does not spill over. So this is a pretty big change, especially if you were running a block of Thunderhammer Terminators and using them to potentially clear hordes. Um, I don't think it's a huge impact for us. It's definitely a huge impact for other armies that were abusing it, like Eldar. But overall, I don't think this is going to be a massive change for us. What do you think, Bob?
I think the sins of the Eldar kind of came into the game, and it's going to hurt a lot of armies that kind of relied on the devastating wounds. Simply because Eldar could fate dice their way into free
Yeah,
mortal wounds.
yeah.
Um, as you mentioned, the main unit that really is impacted by it is the Terminator block,
Mhm.
which is a staple of some of our more successful lists. So I think our Thunderhammer Assault Terminators are going to see a significant uh, hit as far as their viability, especially against those one wound models. So that's going to be a meta shift for things for like facing Eldar, facing Gene Stealer cults. facing some of those armies that only have the one wound,
Yeah.
because now you're not going to be able to take out a whole unit with those unit and spike damage.
Now,
Plus, it also,
at the same time, if you were throwing a block of Terminators into like guardsmen, like you might be doing it wrong. you
I
know,
mean, yes,
eh,
but at the same time, like
you
maybe
know,
they only have infantry.
That's true. That's true. Something that it does actually help with is against custodes, because custodes have a feel no pain that's only good against mortals. And to answer Matt's question here, what about feel no pains versus devastating wounds? So a feel no pain is not a save, so it's something you use to try to ignore damage. So a regular feel no pain will still work against like the one that Grimaldus gives, or our vow. Those will still work against devastating wounds, which is great. Custodes, however, had a feel no pain against mortal wounds only. It specifies mortal wounds. That doesn't work against devastating wounds now, which is kind of a nerf to them, which is probably a good thing because now our blocks of Terminators are that much better against Custodes. Their devastating wounds are just going to punch straight through and deal 2 damage to the golden rods. So, so yeah. Steve says assault terminators should be fighting multi-wound units. Yeah, ideally they should. Totally agree. Also a shout out to Steve. He is one of our Castellan patrons, so thank you for that support there and joining us at this late hour tonight. Everyone who's joined us tonight. Um, so yeah, so yeah, I think overall, devastating wounds doesn't impact us as badly as some of the other armies, but still it will have an effect on our gameplay. Something that will have a much bigger effect on our gameplay is the next thing, which is stratagems that can only be used or that can be used more than once per phase turn. So rules that allow you to use a stratagem even if another unit has been targeted by that stratagem this phase or turn, but do not specify the name of the stratagem, can only be used on battle tactic stratagems. This is a pretty big nerf to our captains and marshals, who are what they're referring to is his ability, where it says you can use a strat for free for 0 CP once per battle round. Um, Previously, we could use it on anything, which was
Yep.
really good. But once again, some armies were probably abusing this, and Space Marines were probably not one of them. Although I mean, we have good strats, but we don't have ridiculous strats. Unfortunately, this means that our only 2 stratagems that we're using this on are Crusader's Wrath, and there's one other, and I can't remember what it is off the Armor of
Uh,
Contempt, maybe.
Armor, Contempt, and
Yeah.
Vicious Riposte.
Do we have 3 battle tactics?
Yep.
Let's take a
Oh,
quick.
no, I'm sorry. It's miscolored. It's an epic deed. Sorry.
Yeah, the color actually doesn't matter. I've discovered because I've been looking through the various armies that I play and been like, which ones are battle tactics and which ones aren't.
Yeah.
Um,
2. So Armor, Contempt, and Crusader Wrath.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Which means we can't fervent a second unit for free, which does kind of suck. But I think ultimately this is probably a good change because there were a lot of armies with really powerful strats that were just using them for free a lot. And some armies, like Tyranids, for example, they have it once per turn, not once per battle round. There's another army, I can't remember who it is, it might be Gene Stealer Cults, that's once per phase, which is ridiculous. So this really sort of limits the power of some of the other armies that have better versions of these than we do. At the end of the day, it devalues our marshals and uh, captains, but it's still at least semi useful.
Yeah, but it does also impact our abilities to use the Calidus Assassin as well. So that's the second stipulation. In addition to reduction to CP, it also affects those that make it more expensive. So a lot of the stratagems that we wanted to negate or vect, as we shorthand call it, aren't battle tactic stratagems. So I mean, a couple of them are like the Necron one
Yeah.
but a lot of them are not. So it makes the Calidus assassin less useful for what we basically used it for. So that's also something to think about because it goes in reverse as well.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. They also changed, pretty heavily nerfed Insane Bravery. This used to be quite a decent strat if you were battle shocked and didn't want to be, from that test in your command phase. Now you have to use it before you take the battle shock test, and it's now once per game. And instead you just auto pass instead of rolling for it. This basically makes this pretty useless. You might see this used in one out of every 15, 20 games, maybe, where you're going to have um, a unit where you're like, I can't take the risk on me not scoring points this turn, so I'm going to use this to avoid a battle shock test in my command phase. Really, really hampers its ability. Was anybody abusing this, Bob? Like, you've played a lot more games than me in 10th edition. Were people abusing this strat a lot?
Yes, this
Really?
was very, very commonly used in games. It's what basically the reason why I revised my stance uh, on Battle Shock, honestly, because you just use this on anything that you failed and you'd pass it, and there you go.
There you go.
And so you can't double jeopardy your Battle Shock. So I mean,
Yeah. All right, fair
so
enough.
that's it. So this was something that needed to be nerfed because basically it made Battleshock trivial. So now it actually is something that is relevant and makes our uphold vow even more useful.
Yep.
Because honestly,
Army-wide 6
anytime,
plus leadership is pretty boss.
yeah.
That's Custodes leadership. Close to it, anyway.
So I
Um,
anticipate probably seeing a little bit more Battleshock out there.
mhm. Just fine. I
Here,
like Battleshock. I think it's appropriately. I like the change to Battleshock being, instead of my models get destroyed, my effectiveness is reduced. I like that change. So
so I played a
hopefully,
game today
yeah.
with some Reavers, 30 of them actually, because it
I
was
could-
a more casual game. I don't know if those of you saw my casual list in the Discord.
I do not
And I played.
condone or endorse this list, by the way.
I, I was playing a person who doesn't play a lot of competitive games, so I experimented a little bit with the new rules, and it was a what I called my peekaboo list. So it was entirely Phobos based, and I had 30 Reavers, and let me tell you, I battle shock some stuff.
That goes right along into what Link was is saying here. Do we think the change to Battleshock makes Reavers worth it?
Well, I used 30 of them, and they battle shocked pretty much everything they charged. So I mean, it's more worthwhile. I played Yukari, so they don't have great leadership.
Yeah.
But I mean, against the right opponent, your whirlwinds are going to do some work. Vidicare still um,
Still
can do
snipe
it.
some
Like,
stuff.
yep. So knock
Uh,
some.
yes, Steve. It does make us leadership 5. We're leadership base 6. I don't know what I was
Yep.
thinking. Which is Custodes level. They're leadership 5 base. So eat your heart out, golden boys.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to get them. I don't think the Infernus is probably still, even though we'll get into their points changes, is still worthwhile. But I mean, there's a lot of sources of Battle Shock that we can get a hold of, and I think it's more useful now with this change.
Hmm. Definitely. All right, so moving right along, Fire Overwatch. Couple of big changes here. The no longer can you overwatch something out of line of sight, which is good because that's just stupid anyway. And secondly, Titanic units can no longer overwatch at all. So, so yeah, that's a pretty big nerf to knights, which is fine with me because they were overperforming with this stratagem, and they got enough guns. You don't need to be firing Overwatch. Get out of my city.
Yeah, Eldar use this a lot. Knights use it a lot. Um, Mortar teams from Pure Guard use it a lot. Other thing to note from the rules commentary that kind of ties into this, the only way it's applicable to us, they change eligible to shoot when equipped with range weapons, unless the rule specifically states otherwise. You, instead of shot, are no longer eligible to shoot until the start of the next phase. So what that
Yes.
means is you cannot fire Overwatch and double shoot. So, you know, obviously this is going to be in your one turn, but there is armies out there that can do that double shoot on there, so that's no longer applicable. So you get one
Yeah.
shot at it.
Yeah, and speaking of designers' commentary, they also made um, the a unit that has shot ineligible to shoot, which it should have been from the beginning. I don't know why. I mean, people were trying to abuse that, saying, "Well, that's not one of the reasons why it's not eligible to shoot." Which was stupid, and I mean, if you were taking advantage of that, shame on you. But now you can't. So, which is good because Tau were abusing that. Not that Tau were doing especially well, but they were abusing that with the little marker light spotting, chain spotting
Well, it's
thing. So,
important now because they got way cheaper
yep,
and way better.
yep, yep. It'll be important going forward. Filthy Xenos. Anyway, moving along, the last thing is the visibility section for ruins. Towering no longer can just, see the whole goddamn board, which thank God for that because that was a little much. Aircraft still can be shot and whatnot, which honestly, like, they should have just got rid of it for both of them because poor aircraft are not very good to begin with. They're usually very fragile, and the fact that you can be like, "Oh, I see you from across here," and you're dead. Hope you enjoyed playing with your aircraft. Although, don't they have to start in reserves still, if I'm not mistaken? Yeah.
Yes.
So at least they'll
There's only
survive turn
really
one.
there's only really like a couple instances that I know of with out in the whole game where the aircraft are good and they're both uh, Eldar versions. So
Of
like
course, of course they
the
are.
hem the hemlock and then the bomber for the void bomber from the Drakari are pretty
Yeah.
good.
So yeah. So the rest of the changes are for the data slate are specific to army factions, mostly buffing poor performing factions. Like Death Guard got a pretty big boost. Death Watch got some stuff. Eldar got one tiny nerf, although they got a lot of points hikes, which we're not going to go into because we don't care. Honestly, I think from what I've heard, Eldar got off light, so we'll see what happens there. Um, but yeah, it's definitely some interesting changes to the meta, but the really big, exciting changes for us as Space Marines are the points. So let's dig into the MFM here. And let me get on over. We're going to start with the Black Templar specific units because they are uh, first on the list here. And literally almost our entire, in fact, aside from the enhancements, our entire section is red. That means they changed the points on every single model. And I was not expecting some of these changes. So let's go through them here bit by bit. Um, so the gladiators all changed. The Lancer went up 5 points, and the Reaper and the Valiant both came down for Black Templars. Now, for these three tanks, along with if we look at and we'll get to the big repulsors and the impulsor in a second here, but specifically these three tanks, we really came out on top as a faction, more so than vanilla. So vanilla, especially the Lancer, was 145. It's now 160. Ours is only 165. So ours went up 5 points, and theirs went up 15. And the other two, ours went down and theirs went up. So we really came out on top with these changes. Our free multi melta is only 5 points now, which is great because honestly, some of these tanks you were paying 25 points for it, which was absurd. It's not worth that anymore. Even 15 points on the Lancer is absolutely pushing it on how whether that's worth it or not. 5 points, I'm good with the 5 points. So I
Yep.
really like these changes. I feel like we really came out ahead more than any other Space Marine faction as far as these, especially the Lancer. We're only paying 5 points more. Everybody else is paying 15.
Yep. Yep. Between these, the Lancer went up. I guess it's expected because those of us that have Lancers were able to get some before uh, Games Workshop Games Workshop strategically ran out of them. Uh, Everyone was taking them. But the Valiant is something as a backup. I probably still won't take the Reaper. I think we got plenty of anti-infantry available in our list, but what is not as available based on even what we even talked about in a recent video is the anti-monster anti-tank, and the Valiant is something that you might consider now.
Yeah,
Honestly, for 155 points,
it's pretty solid for 155 points.
yeah, 3 multi-meltas in the last Talon.
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
yeah,
Um, so it's not bad. So I think that's definitely something that you can have play with. Maybe even as an alternative to the Lancer if you want to go full bore into it. It's a more aggressive piece. So if your list is very aggressive, that would be something that you can play into that,
yeah,
get it up the board, and have that midfield presence. It spikes better, in my opinion,
yeah,
than the Lancer does, um, but the Lancer's more consistent.
yeah.
So depends on what your meta has.
It's quantity over quality. You're hoping you really need to shoot this into an oath target to make sure
Yeah,
that you're landing those wounds because you're mostly going to be wounding on fives, fours, and fives at best, whereas the Lancer is almost always going to be wounding on threes with a
yep,
single reroll. So you're hoping that the volume of shots is enough to land a few shots through, a few more shots through than the Lancer will. But I don't think it's a bad take. If we were to redo our anti-tank video, I'd probably at the very least put it as an honorable mention.
yeah, yep.
So moving along, the biggest vehicle winner for us is the Impulsor because theirs went down what, 10 points, 15 points. Ours went down 30. They're 85 points.
Riding Dirty's back.
They're 85 points, and the multi melta is truly free on this tank. So, yeah, we definitely, once again, have the best impulsors in all the land, which I love. I love running impulsors. I think Sword Bros and impulsors is definitely back on the menu. Not that it was off the menu before, it was just a little bit more pricey to do so. But yeah, the cheap impulsors is awesome.
Yeah, it's good. I'm definitely not complaining about this. Uh, I don't know what to really say about that, like, because if you throw on the missiles and you got that, obviously you have the multi melta with it. It's a nice fire base for 85 points.
Yeah,
You can put something in it. It's fairly durable for a vehicle. You could put the shield on it to make it even more durable if you want to be really annoying. If you're taking a ton of them, but I prefer more offense in my vehicles, make it useful. But yeah, it's great. You 5-man sword brethren in them. You could put, if you want to do MSU with your impulsors, you can do that list. Like towards the end of ninth edition, where you have 4 to 6 impulsors running basic, assault squads or maybe intercessor squads to sticky things, that type of thing. And there's possible play with lists like that, and so I wouldn't turn a blind eye to something like that. That's a significant savings. 85 points doesn't cut very deep into your list at all. 115 points, borderline, but 85 points,
85
why
points.
aren't you taking?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, really love the impulsors. We got some questions. Format said Gladius Valiants, Strength 10 multi-meltas versus the BTs or Strength 9. I think that's a typo, and GW just hasn't fixed it yet. It's either it's probably wrong in the direction of ours is correct, and the vanilla one is wrong. So send your emails to GW about it, and maybe they'll fact it because there shouldn't be a disparity in the two, in my opinion. So
Yeah, especially when all of the other multi-meltas in the game are all strength 9 too.
yep, yeah. Even the ones that are vehicle mounted on other vehicles, that's got to be a typo. The last talent is strength 10. I'm pretty sure it's a typo. Um, Hellwrecked says, would you rather have an impulsor or a land raider? And following up on that question, would you put Hellwrecked and Sword Bros in an impulsor or a land raider? Good question. What do you think, Bob?
I'm gonna cop out because it's really dependent on your list. I'm sorry. So
The answer
in
is
it
yes.
to
The answer is
yes, you can
yes.
do both.
Do
You can do
both.
both.
Yeah.
So I was hesitant on that combo with the Land Raider a lot of early 10th edition. I warmed up to it a little bit because I found a way to draw attention to other things in the list so it wasn't such a huge magnet. And then as long as you don't have two rocks in your list, then you still have other units to play the game. But most of my experience with 10th edition has been with two impulsors in my list with Sword Brethren and characters attached to them, and I've done very well with them. This only makes it better. Um, Simply because A, they're cheaper, and B, as we'll talk about in just a second, everything else got cheaper. So it plays into an MSU
Yeah.
style list extremely well. And that extra durability plus the shooting that you get from them, movement blocking, a lot of extra mobility. It just, I love impulsors and what they do and what they give me in my
They're great
list. So,
units, and they're even better now. So really, there's like Bob said, it depends on your list, but both of them are viable options. So
yes, the repulsor is also worth taking if you don't mind losing assault ramp. It has more
yeah,
guns, so it's a more upgunned version of the Land Raider that you just can't assault out of. So
yeah,
it basically works the same way as the Impulsor with more guns, a little bit more expensive.
yeah. So Sword Brother Joseph says, uh, "Hello, brothers. Does that mean the Repulsor Executioner is still king?" So let's talk about that because they are up next on the list. The Repulsor is 200 points now, and the Rep X is 235. The Rep X, unfortunately, has not been king since 8th edition. Um, it did make our list of best anti-tank options. It's up there on number 3, right? I think 3.
Yep.
So it's definitely better than it was. Um, I wouldn't stick anything more. I wouldn't stick anything dangerous in it. I'd put something cheap, like assault intercessors or something like that, because you don't want this thing driving up the field and being in the middle of the board. It's got an enormous range on its gun. You want it to sit in the back, and then use the cheap unit that's inside to hop out and screen or do something, kill chaff or something like that if they need to. So, so yeah, both of those went down as well. We came out on top again on those because our multi melta price went down to 5 points each on those, and those were two of the biggest egregious offenders as far as overpriced multi meltas on there. So, much cheaper now for us than other people, which is great. So yeah, we have a super chat too. Ryan Wright says, "Ace, I want to summon you to summon to do a math hammer on the Valiant versus the Lancer. I think it's got it in the bag as long as you have oaths. Does that make it viable now that it's cheaper?" Yes, absolutely. I think that we were just talking about this. I don't know if you caught that part of the stream or not. We do think the Valiant is viable. I would,
Mhm.
at the very minimum, slot it into an honorable mention, if not the top 5 in the best anti-tank. And I will absolutely do some math hammer on it. Maybe not right now, but perhaps either in a short or a Templar tip. I'll
Yep.
absolutely do that because I think that's a good comparison, right? You know, obviously the Valiant is shorter on range, but if you can get it into range, what does it do? So great question. Thank you for that super chat.
Thank you.
So, a couple more questions. Helrex says, "How do you defend your guys before they can charge, since they gotta wait a turn?" That's a good
So
question, Bob.
there's a couple of key things. You want to make sure that you either, if you're going to drop them out and using the impulsor, so the impulsor rule changed. So you got to make sure that you're aware of that. So it now states that you can, after the transport has moved and advanced, that you can get out of it still. So you get that extra movement. So every other transport out there cannot do that. You can't get out of a transport after it advances, including the land reader. And typically, after you get out of the vehicle, because if the transport moves and you get out of it, you get that 3-inch ring to get out of your transport. You can't do anything else. It counts as already having a normal move, and you cannot charge. However, if you don't move at the beginning of the turn, you can get out of the transport within that 3 inches. Then you can move, then you can charge as normal. So if you get to the point where you need to, if you're in the middle of the board or close to an objective where you need to, your opponent eventually has to come to you towards the middle of the board to interact with you in your game. They're not going to just hide in the corner because then they're not going to get secondaries, they're not going to get primaries. They have to eventually get to you. So what you can do is you can advance them, get them up to the the center of the board, park them where you need to, wait a turn, allow that transport to take the shots for you so your precious cargo is not going to get shot right away, although you can get them out if you want to, if there's intervening terrain like a ruin, um, or something that's blocking line of sight, obscuring, so that they're safe. But what I typically do is I move them up, I take the firepower coming towards them because they have Sword Brethren. They're always going to be taking firepower. They're going to do their thing, die, maybe not die, and if it survives, then I get out the next turn. I charge. That's what it is. So they have a really good range. Um, so that's really kind of the key there. You want to make sure you move them, advance them up, get them to where you want right away. They're a little bit harder to hide because they do have a little bit of a larger hull base, depending on your terrain. So they're probably going to get shot if you don't get the first turn. But you want to get them up there to the center of the board, get them out. If you need to take another turn on top of that to advance even further, then that's something you could do too. So that's the key to note is if it's stationary and you haven't moved that transport at the beginning of the turn, then you can get out, get that extra 3 inches of movement from that terrain, then move. Then you can also do that charge afterwards. So
Yeah.
in reality, what you're trying to do with this is you're getting an extra turn, possibly two of extra, because they have a 10-inch movement. You normally would only get 6 inches with your infantry, so you get an extra 4 inches plus the advance and get them where they need to go.
Yep.
Plus, you get that protection because the sword brethren really need that protection. So that's what
Yeah.
you're really banking on.
Yep. All right. So, moving along, our characters changed a bit. Our Marshal went up 5 points, and our Castellan went down 5 points. Both of those are interesting changes. The Castellan point drop is welcome. I don't know why the Marshal went up, considering they nerfed his ability essentially. But he's now on par with the Primaris captain,
Yep.
which we're probably not running them a whole lot anymore anyway, because Castellans are cheaper and have a better ability now. Lethal hits is just straight up now better than a free battle tactics strat. Plus, Grimaldus and Helbricht both went down. They are both 95 points now, which is kind of absurd. Uh, Helbricht went down 10 points. Grimaldus went down, 25 points?
Yep.
Man, Grimaldus was worth it at 120. I'd still pay 120 for Grimaldus, and they dropped him to 95. So He is a beast at 95 points. You're still all the same things still apply to him, right? We want to
Yep.
run him with a big blob of Crusaders, certainly. He can go with a blob of Sword Bros. You'd probably want to strat reserve them if you did that. The reason is you want Grimaldus either in reserves or in on the table. You don't want him in a transport, and it's not just because he takes up 4 slots. It's because his abilities don't work in a transport. Versus if he's on the board or if he's in reserves, you can use his ability to make sure that your unit has one of his 3 special abilities, which is really important. So So yeah, so both of these are welcome changes. I mean, we were taking these guys anyway, and now they're just that much better.
Yeah, it's no brainer really for at least Grimaldus. You know, I could see an argument, maybe not High Marshal, depending on what you need in your list, but uh, he's exceptional value for his points, regardless. If you're taking Sword Brethren, you basically want him. Um, Even almost with a 5 man now. Before, I could say if you're taking 5 mans, maybe you don't do it. You put cheap characters, killy characters with them. But
Yeah,
now, 95 points is like
yeah,
you
yeah.
find the 20 points to upgrade a Judiciar to
To the
him,
beat
or
stick that is Helbricht. I mean,
yeah,
uh, he is absolute beat stick. Like Sword Bros make him so much better and so much more dangerous. Um, so yeah. What else did we get changed? Oh, that's right. Our Crusader squads are now 140 points for 10 guys. Uh, Basic Crusaders went down to 65 per 5. If you should not be running more than 5 man Firstborn Crusaders, the simple fact is the only reason to run more guys is because you want to get them in melee, and they suck in melee. Um, they're bad. However, they're the old Las Plas guys, the mini Devastator squads we used to call them. For 65 points, that's a decent little. You can like, oh, I got 65 points left. I don't want to take a character. I need a unit. There you go. Backfield objective sitter. Give him a las cannon and some other gun, and off you go. Decent little 65-point unit, but
yep,
Primaris Crusaders at 140 are crazy good. So 280 for for 20 of them. Okay, like that's obscene value,
yep,
and it just makes them like that much more spammable and that much more ability. The like running a block of 20 is a lot easier now, which is awesome. And them plus Grimaldus is like what 370 points or something like that.
yeah.
375
That's
points. That's
it's a
really cheap. So,
that rock unit got a lot better. Now there's still concerns of getting all of them into combat. You know, I I'm gonna live and die on that. You're not gonna get all 20 man in a realistic
that's fine.
actual game. You're not gonna get all 20 of them in. You're probably gonna get like 15 or 16 in there. But
I just saved
at
60
least you,
points on the Grimaldus 20-man blob.
yeah,
So,
you know, like basically
okay.
your the point savings is just paid for your casualties that you're gonna take.
Exactly.
Getting so I mean,
Exactly.
plus they're like if you want to take a skew list or almost is going to be legitimate, it's going to be a legitimate, it's not, I don't want to even say it's skew anymore. You take five,
A
six
hundred,
maybe.
a hundred Crusader list. Here we come.
Well, no, maybe not that much, but like probably you could even do like 4 Crusader squads, maybe up to 6, maybe we'll see, at least 4. And
Either
you
way,
you
throwing like between 1 and 3 into a list is super easy now.
yeah, I mean
Um,
it's cheap. That's like before we were trying to find things that were like, hey, what's cheap? You know, what can you take on the board? You know, that type of thing. 160 was it was still good for what you got for them. And I typically didn't do it. It was a little tiny bit cheap or expensive, so I couldn't fit them into a list properly. But 140, that makes them way easier,
yeah,
way easier.
yeah.
and you could take two 10-man units and scout them
Yep.
right away in the beginning of the game, and you're on the objective. So you essentially almost have infiltrate on a 10-man unit. It's like,
Yeah. Paul says, "Hi guys, I'm brand new to 40K and chose Black Templars as my first army. Looks like I made the right choice. Thanks for all the great contents and tips. Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to
yep,
the Eternal Crusade. You definitely made the right choice. It's one of the most fun, cool armies out there. So yeah. The other big important change, before we get to this last one, I do want to say the Emperor's Champion went down 10 points. 75 is really cheap for a nice beat stick character. He's also good to stick with a sword, bro.
yep,
Um, I have a sneaking suspicion. Now, we saw the previews at Nova. One of them is a command squad. We already know what happened to the company champion, firstborn company champion, is he got rolled into the command squad and is no longer an individual character. Uh, the new command squad includes a champion. So I have a sneaking suspicion that we are going to lose the company champion as a cheap character, which means if we want a cheap beat stick to stick with sword bros, a GDCR is one good option. The Emperor's Champion is another.
mhm,
And he's very good. He's like a mini Helbrecht. Not quite as good, but he is still pretty nasty. Um, so yeah. But one of the biggest changes, which I thought I was kind of shocked by, but pleasantly surprised, is Sword Bros went down 25 points per five guys. So a 10 man is now only 280 points. That's silly. They're now 28 points a model, essentially. They're 2 points a model cheaper than Blade Guard veterans are now. Can we please stop comparing which one is the better unit? Like they already dealt more damage per 100 points before when they were the same points. Now that's even bigger disparity. And we got the lightning claws back, and they make characters like Helbrecht and uh, the Emperor's Champion that much better. Um, so that means for a five man in an Impulsor, you're looking at 225 points. That's cheap for what that unit does.
yep,
So, so yeah.
yep. And honestly, the it's a great little unit. You're not investing too much into them to be able to do that, but they punch way up.
hmm
I don't remember what they were straight out of the index right at 10th edition, 145, I think they were. Um,
Uh, they were 30
but
points a model because
so
11 man was 330.
yeah,
So they were what 165 for no, that's what they were after. I can't remember.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
They went up 15 points, so maybe 150, something like that. So
so
it's even
yeah,
cheaper.
yeah.
So yeah, they're great. They still do the same things. Now I was watching the stream with, or rather listening to it, because yeah, Art of War, and he's like, I'm not impressed with them. I'm like, what? Watching the games that you've played with Black Templars, though, like you basically just he doesn't play Black Templars very finessey, like kind of like I do, very cagey, and he uses them very blunt instrument, and that's something that you can be applicable for, that you can do. But Sword Brethren aren't a blunt instrument; they are the definition of a scalpel.
Yeah.
So when you throw your 5 mans or your 10 mans at an opponent like just willy nilly, they're gonna die. What do you expect? So you
They're
have
gonna go
to.
out there and they're gonna kill something. Basically, a 10 man plus Helbrecht, and you throw in a Castellan just for fun, will probably kill almost any unit in the game, barring a couple. That would be a fun video series. Like, remember those videos? Will it blend? We should do Will it blend with Sword Brethren. um,
So,
so
I mean,
yeah,
that's something worthwhile. I
there.
so I respectfully disagree. I know that the Art of War team has 1,000 times more big victories in tournaments than I do, and they have a ton of experience. And uh,
But that doesn't mean,
But
just because they have a ton of experience doesn't mean that they're experts at playing Black Templar, because they don't often play Black Templar. And one of the hallmarks of a good player is not only knowing how to play the game and what to do in certain situations, but knowing your army extremely well. That is more valuable than how good the army is on paper.
yeah,
And any
this
top
is all
player
I
will tell you
play.
that, and any top player will tell you that too.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, so yeah, so that's it for the Black Templar specific changes. Let's dive into the Space Marine index changes, the Space Marines themselves. So I get to the sheet here. Um, so, um, uh, do
We're
we
going to
want to?
kind of go over highlights on
Yeah,
these ones,
yeah. We'll
big
hit
changes.
we'll hit all the ones that changed, that are relevant to us, but we're not necessarily going to talk in depth about every single unit. So,
No, there's
um,
a lot of it. You
there's a
basically be
lot
here
of
for three
changes.
hours.
Yeah, and I don't. I got to work tomorrow, so I don't think I want to stay up that late. But in any case, aggressors went down. They're now 100 points per three. So nice little change for them. Does it make them playable? I don't
I
know.
think it does. I
Yeah,
think it does. I think they at 100 points they have viability. They give you some shots in the center of the board. You can get some AP on them. Plus your power weapons are twin linked. I think they do have play at 100 points for sure.
yeah. R. Armstrong says, "Is it worthwhile to convert my Leviathan Space Marines to Black Templar?" Yeah, I did.
Always.
I actually bought an extra set of 5 Stern Guard because I wanted to use the bodies, which are very, very similar. They have the little under the half tabard thing that's underneath the armor plate, same as our Crusaders. The main difference is the belt. They don't have the like medieval style sword belt that the Crusaders have. But I wanted some different poses for Primaris Crusaders, so I hijacked like 3 or 4 of the bodies from that and made some more Primaris Crusaders. So yeah, there's a lot you can do with those. So aggressors went down. Assault intercessors went down 10 points. That's
Yep.
fine. They weren't super great at 90. They're better at 80. It just makes it easier. It's like I have this number of points left,
Yep.
and how do I what unit can I get? I don't want to pay for another character because it doesn't fit in with any of the synergies, but I don't have enough for a 90-point unit, right? Which was always a lot of the like generic Tacticus armored units were all 90 points, and that made it hard. So them being
Yep.
80, nice change. Blade Guard vets. Do you want to say something about them, Bob?
Well, I was gonna say is the assault intercessors are a good combo with the uh, change in the impulsors if you want to go MSU on that and
Sure.
working with a more vehicle based list because obviously you can't take advantage of the Crusader squads with those. So this would be what you'd be putting in them other than the Sword Brethren.
Yep. Blade Guard vets went down to 90 for 3. Nice little discount for them. Um, again, this is not a main melee battle line unit. Not battle line in that sense, but a main battle unit. Like this is a unit you stick on an objective to be annoying to kill, and something that your opponent doesn't want to charge with chaff because they're gonna die. So yeah, nice little change for them. The Ballistus. This was a unit that went down. That was in our honorable mention for uh, top 5 anti-tank, and it went down a good bit. I think 25 points, Bob. That's a
Yep.
nice little change for it. 150 is a pretty solid shooting platform for 150, and a lot of people probably have this because of Leviathan.
Yeah, it's a solid. It was a solid fine before. Now it's a solid, really good fine. So it's
It's
still
above
like it's
average fine.
yes, it's a lot better now having a 25 point discount, and
Yeah.
because some of us that even probably have two of them that might be able to uh,
It wouldn't make it
utilize
crack
that.
the top 5 of our list, but it's
Yeah,
definitely
it's still
firmly in the honorable mention category.
yeah. I think it makes it more fine Yeah, where it was
Makes it
like
more fun. It's like,
him and
right,
Han
all right,
before,
yeah.
and now it's not.
Now it's like, yeah, yeah, we can do this. So the Captain and Gravis armor went down to 80. I still don't know of a use for this guy because he's melee, and we have no melee Gravis units. So, I mean, I guess technically aggressors. So 280 for 6 dudes plus him, but they hit on fours. They're really not that good in melee, like comparatively. Like, I'd rather spend those points on Terminators, I guess, um, who are way more durable. In any case, moving on. Centurions. Centurions got a discount. Assault Cents are now 25 points cheaper per 3, for a total of 150 for 3 of them.
You're still not taking
Thoughts?
him.
Yeah. um, I want to love them. I love the models. I lovingly converted them, and they keep going. It's like, oh, they're great. Back on the shelf. Oh, they're great. Back on the shelf. And they're staying on the shelf for me because
Yep.
for the points, for 6 of them, I can spend 20 points less and get 10 Sword Brethren. I'd much rather have Sword Brethren. So even if they're
So
not as
this
durable.
the Devastator squads are a little bit more interesting take. You can take them as Lascan uh, things, but still, I mean, I wouldn't take them either at the 175. You did skip over the Brutalis Dreadnought, though, if we're going in
Oh, I
order.
did. Oh my gosh. How could I forget the Brutalis? So, yeah, he got a nice fat discount. 45 points is huge. He's only 175 now, which is really cheap. I love that he's that cheap because he doesn't really have any like amazing ranged guns, so he needs to be close and in melee. Um, I think he's pretty scary at 175 points.
Yeah, I mean, he does have the twin like Melta, which is it's okay.
I'd rather
Um,
take heavy bolters, to be honest with you, with sustained hits and twin links on wounds. I'd probably rather have the heavy bolter than than 2 multi shots. So
but yes, he does put out some attacks. I was concerned before. I didn't really care for him before because honestly, there's a lot of other units that you can take before that put out way more attacks for equal to or less points, and you could simulate the durability of the Brutalis. But now it's a lot cheaper, so it's something that you could legitimately use, and it opens the way for having uh, a dreadnought list. Honestly,
yeah,
between all of what you'll see between all the dreadnoughts is that they're fairly cheap now. You can legitimately run a dreadnought list
yeah.
and not feel bad about it.
The other thing
So,
with the Brutalis is he does have a mortal wounds ability on the charge.
yep,
That's not too dissimilar from Helbrix, although Helbrix is every turn. I think the Brutalis is just on the charge. But combine that with Tank Shock, and he can chuck out a decent amount of mortal wounds on a charge, which is pretty nice. He's a good distraction Carnifex at 175. So yeah. Um,
Steve, no characters can join the Centurions.
yeah. Um, so, Sword Brother Joseph says, "Are any of you guys former GW employees? We are not."
No.
Let's see if we have any other questions here. Would you guys suggest any allied troops now with our bonus points, big guns, armigers? Yeah, we actually talked about this on the most recent Caffeine and Crusade. What allies and assassins we might take. And we did already talk about tonight about how the value of the Calidus has gone down some with the change to the way
Yep.
modifying CP strats work. But yeah, those are still viable allies to take. I
Extraction
personally,
squads got nerfed big time though.
yeah, they're 10 man now only now. So,
110
uh,
points.
yeah, but I mean, everybody was taking them. So, yeah, I think, uh, personally, I don't like taking really allies. I like a pure Black Templar list, but yeah, they're perfectly viable to take. Um, so, um, so yeah, so moving along. The Desolation Squad, we already touched on them. 200 points for these guys. They are
Yep.
dead on arrival. Put them on eBay if you haven't already. Or if you really love the models, put them on the shelf because who knows when they'll be good again. Um, Eliminators went down 20 points to 75 points. They are back to their 9th edition points cost. Pretty good. And with the way cover works now, Black Templars players are like, this just in, I've remembered how to use cover. So, Elims are pretty solid. They were solid before, but now they're just that much cheaper, easier to throw into a list.
Yep, they're a good take, especially if you're not taking like a Vindicare. You can get some sniper rifles, or if you
Mhm.
want to use them for anti vehicle with the LAS, you can certainly do it. The
I think
75
the
points is easy to fit a small unit in, honestly.
I think the sniper rifles are almost better now than the what do you call it? The las fusils.
Yep.
Um, so so yeah. Um, then we've got the Lancers, or the Reaper, and the Valiant. Again, we talked about these with the Black Templar ones because if you're running Righteous Crusaders, which you probably should be, especially now, uh, the uh, the BT ones are only slightly more expensive now and therefore better. Um, Heavy Intercessors went to 105 for 5. Um, these guys are okay as a backfield objective sitter, but honestly, for less points, infiltrators do a better job of it. Yeah, these guys are more durable. Yeah, they have better guns, but you're not taking them to do damage. That's not what BT needs them for. If we need a backfield objective sitter, it's got to be probably infills or a couple squads of uh, Firstborn Crusaders.
Yeah. I mean, they're not bad. They're not a bad unit at all. Just honestly, they don't give us a toolkit that we don't have elsewhere.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so
Exactly. The pulsar we already covered. Incursors. So here we get to all the uh, Space Marine units that begin with IN. So we've got the Incursors. They went down to 85. Nice little points drop for them. Again, it gives us a little bit more variety of like, oh, I have this number of points. What unit fits into that? Instead of being like, here's half a dozen units that are all 90. That would be great, but I can't take because I only have 80, 85 points, whatever the number is. I still like Incursors. They have Scout. They give you +1 to hit. I think they're a solid take in a list.
yeah, I mean, they're decent. Like in the right list, they're great to be able to get that +1 to hit. They're cheap.
Yeah.
Honestly, great way to get some infiltration in your list if you don't have it. And they do have the mine, the Haywire mine,
Yep, the
which
mine is
is
pretty
kind of cool.
decent. It's pretty decent. Infernus squad are 85 points. We touched on them earlier. Um, I think I think they can be useful. Are they like a top tier competitive unit? No. But if you face off against a lot of light infantry, then these guys are probably going to help you out to burn
And
through that chaff, and they're a
yeah,
good Overwatch threat.
yep, exactly. They fit
Uh,
also really well into um, an an impulsor to be able to
yep.
fire off of that too as well. So yeah, definitely.
Drive by
Infiltrator.
burning.
The
Infiltrators, they took a little
they went
nerf. They
up.
went up 10. Deservedly so. They're really freaking good.
Yeah, I'm still taking them.
Yeah,
I mean, you have
10
to.
points is
You
fine.
have to.
With all the other cuts that we got, this increase is nominal. You won't even notice it.
Yeah,
So,
it's just you absolutely need infiltrators, at least one squad in your list to be successful. That's why they went up because Games Workshop realized that it was basically a tax unit to be successful against the meta.
yeah.
There's way too much stuff out there that can deep strike into your list, whether it be uh, gene stealer cults or just deep strike in general. Um, oh, we have the inceptors that prevents the inceptors. I mean, all these different things are going to be defense against those. Great on a home objective, great advancing forward. So yeah,
Yep.
the minus the 10 point cost increase. Don't even worry about it.
Yep. Intercessors went down 5 points. Much like Infernus, they're fine. They don't do anything special for us. You know, I'm I'm okay with them. I'm not going to go out of my way to include them. So, they're all right. Invader ATV went down to 70 points. Still really not worth running, in my opinion. It just doesn't have enough guns on it for what you're paying. It is decently durable, but bikes are just not cutting it in this edition, even though they got discounts. The Invictor Tactical Warsuit, however, is only 150 points now, and this is remains a great unit and the best candidate for tank shock. Amazingly, somehow its little Redemptor fist is more dangerous than a Brutalis. So, so it's a lot more squishy, but yeah.
It's surprisingly good. You can take them either for the the flamer version or the autocannon. Both are good.
Mm,
Um, just depending on what your list lacks more of.
yeah.
And if you take a lot of Phobos units, it's great because, like I had in my fun game today, everything is shooting against Phobos units, so then I had free shots. So it was great.
The thing about Invictors is now at 150 points, they fall firmly into the category of what I call a popcorn unit. Basically, a unit that is cheap enough that you don't care if it dies, and dangerous enough that your opponent cannot ignore it. Because if they do, they are going to suffer the consequences. And this unit, especially, throws a crap load of dice on tank shock. You do not want this thing to get into your lines. So 150 points, great value for them. Moving right along, we have the Land Raiders. Now they all went down in points. Land Raiders now 240, Crusader is 230, and the Redeemer is only 260. Some really huge points drops for us. Land Raiders, we like Land Raiders because we like to charge out of them. But yeah, they're all pretty spicy now at these points. These are kind of the points that I've been suggesting they be for a long time, and I'm glad to see that the LRC at least is in that range.
Yeah, but while the Land Raider shader is a significant reduction in price, what the big one I think for our main combo that we're kind of looking at, the Redeemer, is ridiculously good for 260.
Yeah,
And that one is what I'm going to be taking if I'm taking that combo every time, just because the guns are that much better.
the guns are really
Unless
good.
unless you know that you're playing like horde based lists every single game, this, I mean, more unit having that damage too is just way better in general all around.
And auto hits.
Um, and auto hits, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a better take. And I believe the Crusader was 255 originally, so I mean, it's only 5 more points than you used to pay for the combo. So I mean, it's
Yep. Versus 290, I think it was for the Redeemer.
295. Yeah.
295. Yeah. So big changes there. So the Lieutenant in Reaver armor dropped to the same price as the one in Phobos armor. I know you took him today, but generally still not going to take this guy because if I'm taking Reavers, I'm probably deep striking them, and you can't deep strike them with the Phobos Lieutenant or the Reaver Lieutenant. Plus, the Phobos Lieutenant just has better rules anyway.
I just
Um,
I did switch it before the
did
game.
you? I
Yeah, he
told
let
you.
me.
They're the same points anyway.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, Lieutenant with a commie weapon went down 10 points. I'm struggling to find this guy's niche. He's okay, but at the same time, like, I don't know. So it's kind of one of those things.
Yeah.
Um, What else do we have? Outriders went down. They're 105 now for 3. I still don't think Outriders are worth it. They lost all their luster when they lost all those attacks. Which, let's be real, they weren't pushing over any big targets, even with 6 chainsword attacks. Like, come on, just give us back the attacks. Like, taking them in 6-man is nice, but they're the character that can go with them, the chaplain, is also the weakest character of all the chaplains, which is really sad because he's the coolest model.
Yeah, but he went down significantly, so I mean,
Yeah,
it's still not a very competitive take, but I mean, it's fine now if you want to take that unit with the
yeah.
chaplain on bike. Whatever. I mean,
So,
going to a tournament, not a great pick. Playing at
yeah,
your pickup game or maybe a rogue trader, okay, whatever.
yeah,
I can get behind it.
yeah. Um, so, the Predator Destructor now matches the Annihilator's points cost. I'm still choosing an Annihilator over the Destructor because, generally speaking, if I'm taking the Annihilator, or I'm taking a Predator, I want the higher strength, anti-tank guns.
Yep.
We have enough anti-infantry things or anti-elite infantry things that we're going to deal with in melee versus needing a Predator to do that for us.
Yep.
Um, Patrick Joyce says thoughts on the Gravis captain with heavy ints after the points drop. Um, yeah,
So
here
his rules. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, um, the thing about him is, and we touched on this when we talked about his points, is he's a melee character, and he really doesn't have, aside from aggressors who are only okay in melee, he doesn't really have any units that benefit him. Heavy ints want to sit in the back and shoot their heavy guns at 30 inches or whatever the range is for them,
Yep.
and he doesn't do anything for them. So it's unfortunate. They really should make some kind of a melee or make aggressors better in melee. I guess I don't know, because he's a cool model, and I'd run him if he had a unit that made sense with him, but he doesn't.
Yeah. He's got the captain rule, so he reduces the cost of something but to 0. But again, especially in Righteous Crusaders, there's 2 choices to pick from, which is okay. Not unless you're using the generic ones.
Yeah,
And then his other one is he reduces all damage incoming to him but by half. Okay, so he's not really something that I really care about if he dies, honestly, even before.
mm,
He doesn't have any rules really that benefits the unit that he's using it with, other than that CP. And it's so limited now.
yeah,
There's nothing that draws him out as, hey, I really want to take this unit.
yeah, exactly. So next up, the Redemptor Dreadnought. He went down not quite as much as the Brutalis, but he did go down 15 points. He's now only
Yes.
210, which is definitely helpful because he's definitely still good.
Yes. He is
I
very
know Bob's
good.
happy about this.
Yes. I've been running 2 Redemptors for a while now, and it's just like extra points. I'll take extra points. They're great. 10th edition has proven that -1 damage is like stupidly good.
Yeah,
Um against most things. So there isn't a lot of high damage things unless it's a dedicated anti-vehicle weapon, and
yeah,
there isn't tons of it out there. So unless you're Drakari, then you're everything you have as a Dark Lance. But that, beyond that, there isn't a lot of armies that basically all their weapons are anti-vehicle. So it's going to be hard to bring it down. And 100 or 210 points is almost to that point where like it's not a big loss to the list if you lose it. But the output that it has is so great. How
yeah.
can you not like a Redemptor for 210 points?
I know,
2 to
right?
3 is a great take.
Yeah. So the Reaver Squad also went down. They're only 85 points now too. Thank you very much. I still like Reavers.
Yep.
I just made a list recently where I included 5 in a Phobos LT with the idea that they're going to deep strike into my opponent's backfield somewhere, and then shoot and move with the Phobos LT ability, and then charge something and tie it up in melee. And I think for 145 points, if my math is correct, that's pretty cheap to do. Um, I can afford to lose that unit, and in the meantime, maybe I take out a squishy Buffy character or something like that. Um,
Yeah.
so, um, so yeah, um,
It's a nice way to interact on your opponent's side of the board for
yeah,
cheap.
yep. And they got the -1 leadership and the battle causing battle shock stuff, which is now no longer as trivial as it once was. So that's important too. So yeah, I think they're good for 85 points. We're gonna skip over the Rhino because we don't really care. Scouts are back on the menu, boys. Now that we know they're getting new models, their unit's not going anywhere, and they are only 65 points for 5 of them. Um, they're they're pretty solid for 65 points. Um, I forget what they're. Oh, they have the guerrilla tactics where you can pluck them off the battlefield and go into strat reserves.
Yeah.
Um, they can take a heavy bolter. Sure, 65 points, easy way. Again, it's one of those things like a Primaris, or not Primaris, a Firstborn Crusader squad. I got 65 points left. I got 2 options now that I can fill that with a unit instead of a character or upgrades that I probably don't need.
Yep. Yep. It's a great way to get secondaries in your list if you want to take them. Like Alex said, they're going to get upgraded to the new Primaris version. So
Yep.
I mean, hopefully they're not going to get too much of a price hike because of that. But right now they're
Yep.
decent. They're going to
Yep.
play the game, the secondary game, like the Calidus Assassin. One of its tricks is to jump into strategic reserves again. So that's something they can do as well, help out. So
Yeah. Absolutely. And someone asked, and I'm trying to go back and find it now, and I can't seem to, so my apologies. I did not forget your question about Stern Guard vets.
yep,
Now that they went up 5 points per five, so a point per model, basically. And it was asked, how do I feel about them with devastating wounds? Well, honestly, they're unaffected by it. It's actually a buff for them, except for the heavy bolter, which is the only thing that's 2 damage. Everything else is 1 damage for them. So it doesn't matter because 1 damage weapons are function exactly the same with devastating wounds in the new version. The difference is things like custodes, which have a feel of pain against mortal wounds, now don't get a feel no pain anymore. So it's actually a buff for them, aside from the heavy bolter, which, you know, it is what it is.
yeah. I mean, the things that you're firing the heavy bolter at have multi wounds anyway. So
Yeah,
it,
because you can split fire anyway, so who cares?
yeah,
I still think they're a great anti-infantry unit. I am gonna try to squeeze them into some lists because I like them. I like their guns. They're very cool. So yeah.
yeah.
Um,
I want to like them a lot. I do.
you want to like them?
I want to like them a lot. I
um,
mean, I like their models a lot. So
Yeah, their models are cool. And so the storm speeders, 2 of them went up in points. These things were not worth taking before. I don't know why they went up in points. They're certainly not worth taking now. So skip over these guys, in my opinion. I don't see the value in paying 170 points for a Storm Speeder Thunderstrike when I can pay less than that and get a Ballistus Dreadnought that has basically the same number of shots and is tankier.
yeah,
Why would I take a Storm like a? Yeah, it gives you a buff
more
plus with a
mobility.
+1 to wound or whatever. I don't care. It's not worth it. I'd rather spend less points and have more guns and more durability. Um, so yeah. Suppressors went down. They're only 85 points now. That's not bad. What do you think,
Yeah,
Bob?
suppressors are pretty legit. They give that -1
Hmm.
to their ballistic and weapon skill,
Yep.
I believe. So I mean, 85 points for a gun that is 48 inches, got 2 wounds, 2 damage on it.
Hmm.
Its AP is only 1, so there's that. Is it going to bounce? Mm. But fortunately, you don't. That
You're not
doesn't
taking them
care.
for the
Like
guns. You're
it's the
taking them for the
suppression
ability.
fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're mobile, they can deep strike, they're fast.
Yep.
So the whatever the guns do is kind of a bonus in my opinion with these, and that's always kind of been the case with these guys. So I still like them. I wanna try them out in a list. Tactical Marines are only 160 now for 10 guys. I don't know why I would ever spend 160 points on 10 tacticals when I can spend 140 points on 10 Primaris Crusaders who are infinitely better. So it's not going to happen. But, not everyone's as cool as us Black Templars and can take 140 point Crusaders. Which now explains why Crusaders got that points drop, because why would they be the same cost? Right? Because we have scout models in there that are only 4-up armors. They're giving us a discount on those guys. I'm fine with that. So Terminators, unfortunately, they went up 5 points per 5 man. They're now 205. I don't know why these went up. The devastating wounds was nerfed. Sure, they're very durable with thunderhammers. Still don't understand why these guys went up at all. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. They're still worth running. It's only 10 points for 10 of them. You know what I mean? It's not a big deal. It's just a weird thing to me, but it is GW. So
Yeah. I don't know. That I think the Terminators took a big hit with the change to devastating wounds, like we talked about earlier. So I probably won't be taking them in my list. The mortal wounds kind of saved their bacon against a lot of different variety. But yes, you typically target multi wound things with them,
yeah,
and having that devastating wounds is nice to be able to knock out that save because they're only AP2. But no, that's just me. But the next one, Terminator squads went down.
yep.
So
And power
190
fists are
points.
are pretty decent. Power fists hit on
Yep.
threes.
Yep.
So yeah, um, I like this. 190 points for 5 of them. And you
They got
know,
guns.
they got guns, which is not bad, and they got the same 4+ invulnerable and 2+ save. That
Hmm.
was always the big draw to the assault guys, is the extra invul. Now they all have the same invul. I mean, extra wound is certainly nice, but yeah, I like I like these guys now as a alternative. Um, Especially when you deep strike them in, you get to do something with them on the turn they arrive. And now they have the multi-part kit coming with the missile launcher. Missile launcher, in my opinion, is better than the assault cannon. You get those crack shots, which is pretty good. So yeah. And then almost last and certainly least, Vanguard vets with jump packs went down. Who cares? They still suck. We're not. These are now 105 points for 5 models and 210 for two. They're awful. I'm still not taking these guys. I don't care how cheap you make them, GW. No, sadly. More importantly, last and definitely not least, one of my favorite units, the Vindicator, is now only 190 points. So he went down 15. They're really good at 190, I think. In fact, I stuck them in my most recent list to go along with my 2 Lancers and my Land Raider Crusader. So, yeah, I like the Vindy at 190. I thought he was pretty worth it at 205. At 190, I think he's definitely worth it. And I think he goes from honorable mention to being on the list in our anti-tank video. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, he's legit.
Yeah.
Um, I will say our list gets a little bit more complex, so to speak. So
I think
so
I think
I won't
the
commit to a top five,
I
but he
in my opinion, in my humble, biased, totally not biased opinion, the Vindicator bumps the Eradicators off with the points drop. But uh,
Yeah, it's a solid unit.
yeah,
It does a lot of things. It can handle a lot of different units. It can handle the custodies. It can handle vehicles. It can do a lot of different things.
yeah,
It just you have to support it. That's the absolute key. You have to support it. It
you
has to
can't.
have other
It,
threats.
it has to have other threats like two Lancers and a Land Raider bus full of Sword Bros.
Or
So
maybe Valiance with the Vindicator might
mm,
be a thing.
might be a thing. Might be a thing. Save 10 points. Save 10 points a tank. This bad boy's got so many meltas in it. So yeah, so that's the list of changes. I don't think we missed any. You think we missed any? Any that you think of that we missed?
Nope.
Um,
Uh,
I really almost could not be happier. I would have liked to see the Redemptor go down a few more points, maybe to 200. But I'll take 15 to start with.
I'm not going to complain.
I'm not going to complain
I'm not
either.
going to complain.
We dropped so many points in other places. Uh, I'm not going to
Yeah,
complain about it.
most
So,
of my list gained 200 and some odd points.
yep,
So,
yep.
I mean, like,
Hmm, how
I'll go
about
from
that?
14 units to 16 units, or
Sure,
and one of my lists was I was at 16. Now I'm at 19. So, like, I mean, pure
exactly,
MSU.
exactly.
So, like, big winners on this one, I would say, is foot based units. So
Crusaders,
the
Sword Bros.
Crusaders,
Yep,
those
our
are
characters, all big winners.
going to be on that. I think the ability to actually function in an MSU uh, impulsor list is now viable. If you want to do that, before it was a little bit too expensive, you had to invest a little bit too much into it. Now it is perfectly viable. So that's a list that you can do. Dreadnought lists are uh, on the horizon. I feel so
Which
maybe
is
not
good,
necessarily Black Templar, but you're
because I have 5 Redemptor class dreadnoughts. I have 2 Redemptors, 2 Brutalis, and a Ballistus.
yeah. So I mean they're good, and we didn't talk about the regular dreadnought. That
Oh
one went
yeah,
down
it went
too.
down
So
135 points. I'm probably still not running them just because I don't know. I feel like for this 5 points less, I'll take a Pred Annihilator and it's better.
yeah. So I mean there's a lot of things that we're gonna be able to do. So I think the combination of units. One of the interesting takes that are really kind of interesting me, and I might be looking at them a little bit more serious, is the aggressors. Out of the range of the units that have been traditionally looking at, because 100 points for per 3 models is an
You
interesting
taking
take.
you taking flames or bolts?
Bolts for sure, and if you throw a biologist with them, then they get a little spicy.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can get them even
can
more
see that.
spicy if you're in Gladius too, so you can theoretically get them really really nasty. But I am not using Gladius. I am using Righteous Crusaders because, in my opinion, it's a better detachment overall. And yeah,
Yeah.
but I
Speaking
see
of
this.
dreadnoughts, Rogue Doombot asks, do you run a Tech Marine with the dreads? Personally, I think if you're gonna do like a dreadnought list, like a dreadnought spam, March of the Ancient style, yeah, you absolutely want one. But if you're running like, 2 or even 3 dreadnoughts, you can kind of take it or leave it. It's up to you. Um, he's good. He's a fun candidate for Witchseeker bolts because now his Forge Bolter has precision.
Yep.
But I don't think he's necessary. I think if you want to take him, he's fine. He's great for that. But he's not a requirement.
Yep. So I think there's a lot of options out there. I mean, even the Blade Guard veteran squads, they went down. So that's something that you can take. They're even more viable now with the Judicar and the Blade Guard veteran sitting in the middle of the board. That's
Hmm.
been a favorite tactic of mine for a while, and 10th edition's been pretty successful. That's even cheaper now, so I'm not going to complain about that. There's just a lot of things you could do. I think the biggest winner though is going to be the Primaris Crusader squad. 20 points down on those things is going to be, you're going to see a lot of lists that are going to be investing in those 10-man units, maybe a 20-man unit, to kind of highlight the rules of Grimaldus,
Hmm.
and let everything else kind of scout across the board and just dare your opponent to deal with it.
Yeah.
That's going to be something to be interested in looking at,
Yeah.
but I dread painting them. I paint so slowly, so I have to commission
Bro,
things out, and
bro, I feel your
and
pain. So
having
yeah, I j-
50 Crusaders is going to be like daunting to paint.
yep. I am happy though for new scouts because that means I get new poses for my neophyte models. Because while I love Crusaders, I love the models. I like to have dudes that are at least different enough that uh, it's not like, okay, here's five guys that are all identical posed basically, because there's very limited number of like bodies.
Yep.
Obviously, you can do their arms and different things and give them different weapons and whatnot to kind of, at least at like a distance or glance or whatever. Okay, these are different guys, but when you look at like some of them up close together, you realize, oh, it's the same body. Um, so um, so yeah, which is why I went with some of the Stern Guard to just spice it up a bit. And Yeah, looking forward to the Scout models. For all of you kit bashers out there, something to note if you don't remember this, the Neophytes little bottom tabard piece is separate. So you can just take that and slap it on and the top half torso. I'm sure will be the same. That's the part that's got the little belly part of the tabard. You can take those two bits and put them on the new legs of the scouts, and boom, neophytes. So
So the big question out of all of the balanced slate, do we increase our win rate? What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I think we absolutely do. We've been hovering at about 46% with Righteous Crusaders. A lot of other armies got boosts too, but the armies that were the toughest matchups for us, Custodes, Knights to a certain extent, and Eldar, are all nerfed. They all took, some of them hefty nerfs. Custodes don't have a lot of several of their key units that they were running big blobs of are now max 5 man. So they're not as efficient as they were. They'll be easier to bring down the unit. So I think we definitely increase. My guess is we're going to crest 50%, maybe being like 50 to 53% is my guess. What do you think?
I think that's good. It's going to allow us to definitely get above the 50% mark. Are we going to get to the 60? No, I don't think we're going to
We
get
don't
to
want to be to
55.
60.
Um, I think probably 51, 52%. I don't think this is going to be significant enough across the board for Space Marines, especially with the new codex coming out shortly-ish. Yet before we have that point, or at least until that point. To really kind of shake the meta that much. But I do think we're gonna get above that 50% mark.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned, a lot of things did get significantly better. So you're gonna see like sisters. So you're gonna see reduction. I think Necron's got some pretty good points adjustments if I saw correctly.
They definitely got some nerfs. Some of their big guns, like the Canoptech Doomstalker and the Doomsday Arc. The Doomsday Arc went up a good chunk of points, which, I mean, it kind of sucks, but at the same time, it's also, warranted because it's a really dangerous gun. The Canoptech Reanimator went up 10 points. Their Warriors did go down 1 point per model. So running a block of 20 warriors now saves you 20 points. Um, So that kind of offsets some of those. The Lich Guard took a pretty big uh, chunk up. Overlords, you're not going to see overlords on foot as much because the reanimation protocols, um, one where they can enact their reanimation protocols after being shot, stratagem is not a battle tactic stratagem. So I think you're going to see lords on foot instead of overlords, because overlords have the free strat like our captains do. Um, the Honestly, I like the Lord better anyway, because he's only 65 points and he allows you to use strats while you're battle shocked, which is important for that unit. Yeah, we're gonna see a lot more Ceres on there. He dropped from 220 to 185.
Yep.
which is He's like basically an auto take now. He was good, but he was almost an auto take at 220, and now he's definitely really good. So
Yeah. So
um,
we're gonna see a lot more
they got
Votan
nerfed
as
a little
well.
bit. Yep, Votan got a huge buff. Death Guard got a huge buff. Um,
Um, and then also the biggest one, I think, probably the biggest winner overall out of everyone is the Tau. The
yeah,
Tau were buffed crazily high. You're
yeah,
gonna see them all over the boards again. Maybe too much. So they got huge reductions, especially to their crisis suits. These things are gonna be all over the place. I mean, Riptides are really cheap as well. At 180, so there's going to be a ton of damage.
the
I
age
mean,
of the
so
Wraith Knight is over.
yeah,
They're
those are
510 points now.
yeah,
I
they
think
can't be
that's
reserved anymore.
I think that's the single most expensive unit in 40k that isn't like something stupid like a Titan.
Yeah, the Yakarn got nerfed pretty heavily. So he's 350 points now. Um, so most elder players, well, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of them are playing Yanari and using the Yakarn to use secondaries and then slaughter everything that was there and then just jump around the board for free
Yeah.
to get secondaries. Um, so yeah, those are some places that we're gonna see, but the big guns went down. Thousand Suns got nerfed a big bunch of it.
Yeah.
Um,
That was weird. They
so I'm
weren't
not
they
sure
weren't
about
super
that.
overperforming, but they took it on the chin too. Um,
I would say Gray Knights are pretty even about where they were. The Gene Stealer cults, for those that do have players with Gene Stealer cults, they took some ups and some downs, if I remember correctly, but their ability to bring back things every turn got
Significantly
nerfed.
diminished.
So that is what hurts us. They're easy to kill, but they're taking 20 plus units, and basically by turn 4, they have 20 plus units still left on the board.
Yep,
So
that's
now
gone.
that's going to be significant.
Yeah.
They'll be
So
bringing about half as many.
I don't know if Votan got a good buff, but they were so bad before. I don't know that they're gonna be a true meta threat. And part of that stems from they just don't have a lot of units to choose from. They need new units. I assume whenever they get their codex, that they're gonna get some more units to go with it because their initial wave just isn't enough to cover up, what their weaknesses are right now, which is ironic given how broken they were when they first came out. So yeah, um, but yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a shift in the meta. We're going to see Tau climb a lot. I think Space Marines are all going to be over 50%. I think of the Space Marine chapters, BT came out the best. Blood Angels, though, Sangard finally aren't ridiculously overcosted. We're going to see them on the table again. Um, Eldar are going to be taken down a notch. Is it enough? Well, remains to be seen. Custodes got nerfed a lot. They're going to drop. Knights got nerfed. They're going to drop. Um, so did GSC. Now, GSC, there wasn't a ton of players playing them, but they had a very high win rate with the players who were playing them. So, very high skill cap army, which is
That
probably the
was one
reason
of
why.
those. It was one of those armies that could potentially reasonably expect to beat the Elder if
Yeah,
you
if you
had a
knew what you're
skilled
doing.
player.
If you knew what you're
Yep.
doing. But all the top players were all playing Eldar anyway, so it didn't matter. um, Trying to think anybody else that is going to probably make a pretty significant climb.
So Space Wolves and Blood Angels, I think, are gonna be more common now. Honestly, because of the points reductions.
Yeah,
So I welcome that. I like playing against Space Marines because I play Space Marines. I want to have an opponent that also plays Space Marines. That's not a mirror match, if that makes sense. I want
yeah.
to have something with unique rules because I still like facing them. So I'm happy that they got some buffs to make it more even
There's also that
across the
element of
board.
familiarity, right? You know what you're facing, you know what to
Yeah,
expect.
yeah.
So
Um, I don't think the Drakari had enough to really make them much without significant changes. But Death Guard might be interesting now that they actually have a rule.
they have a
Um,
really nasty rule too. Like one of my Death Guard friend, he gonna have a hard time choosing which debuff he wants because they're all good. So so
yeah,
yeah,
they got some pretty significant reductions too. So I think overall it's going to be healthier, but I think we can easily say now we aren't out of any game. I think the Eldar are going to still be probably the top dogs because they have just so much in their index that they can do that can cover for weaknesses for
Fate
the things
dice
that
are
got
still
nerfed.
stupid good.
So yeah, when you
So
can
yeah,
basically make anything that you need
when you can
the
cheat at the
six,
game for free, yeah, you're gonna be the best army.
but we
So
can
yeah,
beat them now.
they're
So I think
beatable
that's
now.
something
Yeah.
where before it was
So
kind of like,
So
eh.
yeah, so that's the stream, guys. Thanks for sticking around. I know for some of you it's very late, our friends in Europe and whatnot. Yeah, overall, really good stuff for us. Really excited to start list building again. Only to have that turn on its head is in a month when the codex comes out. Hey. So yeah, until then, don't forget to check out our Patreon page. We've got a lot of great benefits for that. I really appreciate all of our patrons that support us, and all of our YouTube viewers. We are 50 subs away from 7,000 subscribers, which is pretty awesome for us. I'm really excited about that. We could not have done this without all of your guys'
Yep.
support. Check out our dice at baronofdice.com. They're really awesome. We have patron exclusive dice as well. If you're a patron member and you want to buy them, make sure you go to the Patreon page. There is a post there with the special discount code that you need so that they don't cost $40,000. Uh,
Or if you were lucky enough to be at Nova, you had access to them too as
Or if you
well.
were lucky to be at Nova, you had access to them as well. So, great dice, really, really well made. Use discount code IN40K to save a couple of bucks off your purchase, regardless if it's our dice or not. Yeah, that's all we got. So, until next time,